Hello and welcome to the No Huddle podcast. This week 8. Happy National Tight Ends Day to anyone who celebrates. It was an interesting week. We got a lot of, I'd say, this whole first half of the season, it was really hard to tell who were the good teams. And I think for the first time, really all year, we got a lot of really good readings. That's something I think we're going to talk about towards the end of the show. We got a lot of clarity for the first time all year as to who is potentially good. Teams that maybe were fringe contenders, a lot of them took a step back this week. So a lot of things to talk about. I say we dive right in to what was the biggest game of the week, Packers and the Steelers. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers' return game, or not return, I'd say it was in Pittsburgh. So, just a big game in general. Playing his old team for the first time. If I remember correctly, if he had won this game, he would have been one of just a few quarterbacks to beat every single team in the league. And instead, the Packers ended up winning 35-25. Just a few basic stats here. Jordan Love goes for 360 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. Pretty much a perfect day out of him. The Packers' ground game got it going in large part due to Emmanuel Wilson, their backup. And for the Steelers, Rodgers has right around 220 yards, 2 touchdowns. Jalen Warren gets them 13 carries for 62 yards. A good game out of him, especially in the first half. And we're going to talk about more about why that carry number is so low. But first, going to the Packers. This was probably the best game of Jordan Love's career, which, he's been a starter for 2.5 years, I want to say. So it's not like an insanely large sample size, but this game, it really felt dominant, especially in the second half. First half of the game, the Packers offense was moving, but there was a lot of issues. They couldn't really, they ended up having to settle for field goals. And McManus, who was coming off of injury, he didn't have the greatest game, especially in that first half. It looked really rough for him out there. So it actually ended up giving the Steelers a 16-7 lead heading into half. And then from there, the dam just exploded. Everything that the Packers offense tried in the second half worked flawlessly. I was watching the second half in the airport, and I was just watching it. I'm like, I would look away for a half second, and all of a sudden I'd look back on my phone and be like, oh, well, they just got 40 yards. I'm going to curse here for a second. I'm sorry. But Jordan Love, this game really hit the fuck it, someone's down there ball so many times. It was pretty unbelievable to watch. I remember just so many times, whether it was like Christian Watson or Tucker Kraft, every single one of those seemed to work. I remember that was a big meme a year ago, and it worked without fail basically every time. And speaking of Christian Watson, him coming back really gave this offense the last bit of juice it needed. Throughout the whole first half of the year, I'd say this Packers offenses looked very shaky up and down. Sometimes, like we saw in the Dallas game, they put up 40 and everything they tried worked. And then other times, like we saw against the Browns, it did not work out at all. So I think Christian Watson really gives them that true receiver deep threat that they've been missing for this whole time. And he looked really good in his first game back. Christian Watson's has always been one of those players where the talent is so obvious, but I mean, he was never able to get it to click, or because of all the injuries, So hopefully he's able to stay healthy. We see how he looks like in this offense for a prolonged period of time, because I really think he could be like that X factor that pops everything. Like I mentioned before, Josh Jacobs in this game really couldn't get much going, and I think he had to come out because of injury. And in his place, Emmanuel Wilson came in, and it really did provide a big pop for that Packers run game. Because Josh Jacobs is a straight, downhill runner, power back, and sometimes you just need a little bit of elusiveness. So they got that with Emmanuel Wilson. I'm curious to see how that looks like going forward as far as them splitting carries. And I think, probably outside of, Aaron Rodgers coming back, and what ended up being the biggest story of this game was Tucker Kraft. It was unbelievable. I think he finished with 150 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he has a burst to him. Sneaky athletic a little bit, dare I say. He was so good in space. I saw a tweet that was the highest paid tight end right now is George Kittle at $19 million. And if Tucker Kraft eventually gets $21 million, that's perfectly fine. That will be a giant steal. The Packers should do that right now, because he has been the, I just mentioned Christian Watson was the deep threat receiver one. Tucker Kraft has just been the receiver one for this offense. He has looked so good throughout these last few weeks. And, I'm going to be honest, I wasn't the highest on Tucker Kraft. I eventually thought Musgrave would come in and start taking some snaps, but no, Tucker Kraft has fully came in and ran away with that job. He is special. His, like I mentioned, his speed, and then he has this really uncanny, Travis Kelce like ability that the really good tight ends have to just always find himself wide open. Whether that's like working a one-on-one matchup or running into the right spot, he has been electric for this Packers offense. And at some point, like we saw, like when I talked about the Colts last week, he has kept up this level of production for enough time to where you can say it's just legit. He's just a really, really good football player. And he is going to be like the most important piece on that Packers offense, of course, outside of Jordan Love, throughout the rest of the year for, of course, a Packers team that is right now the 1 seed. I just wrote like in big bold letters on my notes here. It said like overreaction, top 3 tight end in the NFL. I don't even know if that is an overreaction. That'd be one that's interesting to think about. Obviously, you have Kittle, you have Trey McBride, Bowers whenever he's healthy, but he looks so good right now. He looks like the second best, but we'll see. The Packers defense, inconsistent, as you know, this whole Packers team has been. But in that second half, they really did lock down completely. And Micah Parsons, Chris Collinsworth pointed him out on the broadcast. He was so good this game. True game wrecker in every sense of the word. Found a way to always get past whatever Pittsburgh was throwing at him and really make Rodgers uncomfortable. Nothing new out of Micah Parsons. That's just kind of what he does. But a bigger part that made this Packers second half defense way better is something that had nothing to do with the Green Bay Packers and had everything to do with the fact that the Steelers just stopped running the ball. I don't understand it. It was something where I think like even Gainwell was working well in that first half. They were getting like pop runs with that jumbo package that I pointed out last week. I'm not sure if I did, but where they come in with like 2 tight ends and an extra offensive lineman and they just run downhill. It works so well, and it did work in this game, but they didn't end up using it very much in the second half. For the Packers defense, they were able to get big stops on third down. They didn't let Rodgers kill them with like big plays. For the most part, just like handled business and let that offense go to work. On the Steelers side of things, like I mentioned, the run game thing really did infuriate the hell out of me. Especially when you're up 2 possessions. They were up in 16-7 at half, and they just didn't run the ball. In the second half, I want to say Jalen Warren had 3 carries. And it's something where I don't understand it, because this Packers defense could tee off and brush the passer like really no one else since the Micah trade, and you're letting them tee off on you every time by telegraphing that you're going to pass the ball. And I understand that Rodgers in like the quick game can get it out really fast, probably better than anyone else, but if you're going to let that offense tee off on you every time, of course it's going to fall apart. It's the Steelers offensive line in itself isn't that great. So the gameplay for the second half being doing nothing but passing the ball with a lead just really makes no sense. I'm going to talk about the Steelers defense for a bit because it is the highest paid unit in football in all of the entire NFL. They have a higher payroll than any other offense or defense in the league, which is crazy. And they are giving up like nearly 30 points per game to good teams. It doesn't make sense. I'm just going to go through the sport track of players. It is crazy. They're paying $122 million just this year in terms of cap hits. And TJ Watt is on the small end of his deal. Cam Hayward is still on a 2-year, $40 million deal. Alex Highsmith is still being paid, and he's not even out there right now. Jalen Ramsey is in the cheap $5 million portion of what is now a 4-year deal that is going to go on, and that will eventually pay him $30 million in a couple of years. If you look at this defense, it is in theory stacked. Like, there are so many pieces here, but they're just old pieces. They're really players that aren't that good right now. Something that I never thought I'd frankly say is like TJ Watt is okay. He's fine. He doesn't give you the same impact that he used to. I feel like whenever it was like before TJ Watt in like the primetime lights, you could always count on him to make like some absurd play. I would remember like you would just watch and wait, and he would come up with like the most stupid fumble 6, or he'd come up with an insane like interception even. And you just don't see it anymore. You don't see TJ Watt go wreck the game, kind of like Micah did. It was it's something odd, something you really don't see. Or I haven't seen out of TJ Watt in a long time. And for Jalen Ramsey, I'm a Niners fan, so it's safe to say I'm not the biggest Ramsey guy. But even removing my bias, he looks to be a mistake at that corner spot. And the Dolphins look really smart to get out of that contract right now because he's rough. He there's not he doesn't have the speed to really go be like a true shutdown outside corner like he used to be. So what's ended up happening is he's like playing this like slot / safety role. That's like it's such a luxury to have an overkill to have Jalen Ramsey in that role. Yet there they are doing it, and the defense as a whole just can't cover well. Even with a corner I really like in Joey Porter Jr. Their linebacker play is like fine. Patrick Queen is fine. Their safety play isn't good. There's for a team who has specialized on defense the last few years, and we've always just said if they're a quarterback away, they just need competent quarterback play because we know their defense will carry them. We know they have this. It's weird that they now finally have the competent quarterback play, and now here comes down everything else. It's a failure that lies at the feet of Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan, the GM, for just getting older players, refusing to move on from guys that, keeping guys a year too long rather than a year early. And it has taken what should have been like, I just said it, like they have the QB. It took no more Mason Rudolph, no more Mitch Trubisky. They have a solid quarterback play. They can get up to 20 points per game. They can get field goals, which is something that was like all that they needed a while ago. And here it is. Touching on Rodgers, like he's a perfectly efficient, fine, quick passing quarterback, which would have been enough for the last few years, but this year it's not. And whether you want to blame that on Aaron Rodgers, which I've seen some people do in the national media, or you want to just like give him credit or just ignore it, there's not much to say about the way Rodgers is playing because considering the fact that they paid him like $10 to $15 million, he's fine. He is operating behind a truly awful offensive line, and he's getting the ball out quick. He's getting the ball to DK Metcalf like enough to get that offense going, and they don't have enough. They don't have a receiver too. The Steelers, if they want to be like in any form of contention, really do need to go get another receiver too. If I was them, I would like have a big star check mark, whatever, next to Jacoby Myers. He seems like a really good fit with what Rodgers likes to do with the quick passing game, and seems like a really good compliment for DK Metcalf. And that was a lot of just trashing on the Steelers. But what I will give them is that whenever they do stick to the run, which they didn't do this game, but whatever, they really do have something fun with like this jumbo personnel where you put in 2 tight ends and you put in an extra offensive lineman. Because it really does work. We saw in the Bengals game, it worked like extremely well to the point where Jalen Warren had like one of the best games of his career. But it's something that I think could work against every team because Darnell Washington is such a physical freak. It was one of the reasons I really loved him out of the draft because he can block like crazy. And not to mention the fact he's like 6'6" and he's like 300 pounds. He's just this giant guy. And they found this other swing tackle who's also like pretty decently fast. So it makes it so that they can just get them out in space and just pancake people, which, as a football nerd, I love. And it's a really fun wrinkle to that run game. And if they can embrace it, which, asking Arthur Smith to do the logical thing is usually a very painful process. But if they can embrace it, I think it could give them a fun identity. That plus the quick passing game. Really, there is something to it. But this game, it's hard to be positive on the Steelers after watching this one. And for the Steelers, it does get worse because if you look at that schedule, they had the easy part of it. This, like, the first 7 games of the season was the simple part. And now it was the time where they were supposed to rack up wins. Like, when they were 4-1, that's good. That was the plan, right? You win as many of these games in the first half as you can. And then the second half is murderer's row. You just try and stay alive throughout it and hopefully end up with the division. And 2 weeks ago, it looked like that plan was going perfectly. But then you drop a very, very stupid game to the Bengals. And in this game, a game where you had control through the first 30 minutes and just let your foot off the gas completely, now you're entering 4-3 with the Ravens starting to surge. We're going to talk about them soon. And all of a sudden, that like seemingly firm grasp on the division is really starting to loosen. All right, moving on. I have to talk about this game. I was there on Sunday. I don't know if you guys checked out the shorts or whatever, but I was there in person at NRG Stadium in Houston. Fun trip out. Houston, not the greatest. Like the people there were all super nice, but the city itself was not that great, but the stadium itself was awesome. Indoors, really nice, but safe to say the game was not. The Niners ended up losing this one 26-15 in a game that the score really did not reflect the nature of that game. It was a blowout. It was domination through and through. If the Texans would just put up more touchdowns instead of field goals earlier in that game, it would have gotten way uglier way more quickly. Like I said, just domination completely. This Texans offensive line that was the worst offensive line in football. Like, there was no debate about it. Ariante Arce, their rookie left tackle, was just dog trash through the first 6 weeks of the year. And he looked like Trent Williams. He looked like an all-pro in this game. And this interior offensive line that hasn't been able to block anybody and gave up 18 quarterback hits or something like that to Seattle. Completely shut down our guys. And we couldn't... there was no sacks recorded. I want to say there couldn't have been more than like 15 pressures. I'm not sure the exact number. But C.J. Stroud was so comfortable all game. He had over like 300 yards, which for him has been really rare for the last year and a half. And just the main thing is just how comfortable he looked, how easy everything was. Whether that was because of like bust assignments because corners weren't in the right spot or the linebacker wasn't in the right spot, or it's because he had 8 seconds to throw the ball. It always worked. There was always something there. They could also just run the ball in this game really, really well, which is, again, something the Texans have not been able to do all year. Like, they made Nick Chubb look like Browns Nick Chubb. They made Woody Marks look like USC Woody Marks. Everything that could have gone wrong for the Niners and the defense of the ball did. It was really, really brutal to watch. I even took a brief glance at the tape just before I hopped on. It was so bad I just had to shut it off. It was so brutal to watch. There was just so many mistakes at every single level. Niners have a very, very on the Niners side of it, they have a real problem at that cornerback 2 spot. Lenore obviously is great. It's the jersey I'm wearing today. Even though he had a really, really stupid mistake in this game where he got an interception and instead of going down and letting the Niners kick like a 52-yard field goal, just kept trying to run and go for the end zone, which complete lack of football IQ and situational awareness. But outside of that, he's of course a great cover corner and he showed it throughout this game. But Renardo Green, who is the cornerback 2 for the Niners, was getting picked on a lot in this game. He has been picked on throughout the entire season. And even more so was our rookie nickel corner, Upton Stout. That is a spot where last week he was out and we had our backup fill in. I talked about Chase Lucas on the pod last week, and I gave him a lot of flowers. This week, I cannot do the same for Upton Stout because he was by far the number one guy they picked on the most. I think he had he gave up 9 catches in this game. It was rough. Even they pulled him out for a few plays because he got banged up, and Lucas came in, and all of a sudden, their offense stopped going at that nickel corner spot. But then, of course, Upton Stout came back in, and here became the targeting again. Tough, brutal tape to watch. I will eventually get through it, just because you really do need to see the mistakes of this team. But that sucked. As for the Niners' offense, thoroughly outmatched by Houston's defense. When you have 2 game wreckers like Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, you think you would respect them, throw chips at them, especially Will Anderson. Maybe you pray and leave Danielle Hunter on Trent Williams, but you either double team them or you throw 2 chips at them or you make sure you're getting rid of the ball quick. And what did the Niners call up in this game? How about Jawan Jennings? You go block Danielle Hunter on a play action play and obviously watch that fail. How about we get Matt Hennessy, the backup center, to go pull and go guard Will Anderson on the right side? Safe to say that one didn't work either. Shanahan had a truly brutal game in this one. So many weird, long developing passes to call against a Houston defense and defensive line that has no flaws. I really didn't get it. We saw a Sky Moore deep shot get called in this one. A couple deep shots to Jawan Jennings, and it's did we scout the other team before watching this game? For Mac Jones, average to below average game out of him. He had a really, really gutsy, nice throw to George Kittle, so to get him a touchdown National Tight Ends Day. Led a solid drive in the second half that had a really clutch, 3rd and 17, just sort of huck it. And it was like a really perfect ball to Juwan to catch it on that left sideline. But, I mean, outside of that, there's nothing positive out of the passing game all day. CMC on the ground, didn't get to see much of that either. I think he ended up finishing with 8 carries for 25 yards. And that's because the offense had the ball for 5 minutes in the first half to the Houston's 25. So we really couldn't run the ball because we ended up being down for so much in this game. So we never got a chance to see that if that ground game could really pop like it did last week. And if I'm being honest, the way the game was going probably wasn't going to anyways. And I'm going to focus on one player here specifically for the Niners offense, and that's Juwan Jennings. It's unfortunate because he was one of my favorite players on the team the last few years. I have his jersey hanging up in my closet, and he just is fully unrecognizable of what he was a few years ago, or even last year. Like, he had a big drama in the offseason with his contract, and, you know, he had a hamstring injury that magically got healed as soon as their contract dispute was done. So, you know, I'm not saying it's not a hamstring injury. It wasn't a real injury, but it wasn't a real injury. So all of that stuff goes on. He ends up missing all of the offseason. And, you know, he plays like 1 or 2 games and gets injured, which, you know, surprise, surprise, he missed the entire offseason. And even now he's back and he's like supposedly healthier now. And he's a liability. He's flat out a liability. He is like avoiding contact, which is so weird out of a player whose entire brand was like, I'm going to block like crazy. I'm going to get up in the other team. I'm going to, you know, just be a nuisance. And instead, he's just like a soft receiver, which I never thought I would say about Juwan Jennings. And I hate the word soft when like describing an athlete, but that's the vibe I'm getting. It's so weird to see like just such a 180 on a player. And every week I'm just like, oh, okay, well, this is the week we'll get back to regular Juwan. And I'm like, I think the fan base, including myself, is just so tired of hearing excuses of, you know, what Juwan is this injury or he's rehabbing or he's coming back. Like, we're tired of it. It's, I personally, whenever Ricky Pearsall comes back, which God knows when that's going to be at this point, but whenever Ricky does come back, I want Juwan on the bench and I want Ricky and Kendrick Bourne or Ricky and Brandon Ayuk, which whenever he comes back in like the next few weeks, that would be what I want. I do not want Juwan Jennings being a starting receiver out there. But if Ricky Pearsall is out next week, you don't really have much of a choice. Overall for the Niners, though, I'm going to get off the Juwan Jennings rant. It's just something that frustrates the hell out of me. Big game against the Giants next week, which I never thought I'd have to say. That but it's going to be huge because the Niners right now are 5-3. Seattle and the Rams now have a 1-game advantage on you, or I think half game technically because we beat them both. But we'll also see them both later in the season. So right now, at least a half game back for the division, and you can't lose this game. Go to 5-4 with the trade deadline coming up because right now the Niners have no pass rush whatsoever. Like I said, made the Houston offensive line look like a team of all pros because of all people, Bryce Huff's injury was the one that was the straw that broke the camel's back and just made it so that this defense just doesn't work at all anymore. So as the trade deadline comes up, you got to hope a pass rusher comes in soon. It doesn't even have to be like a game-breaking one. It doesn't have to be Trey Hendrickson, which is the one that I've wanted selfishly as a fan. But it just needs to be like somebody. Like Arden Key from the Titans would be awesome right now. Or like Kevon Thibodeau, which we're getting conflicting reports about whether he's available. It seems like all NFL reporting has become so murky as of late, but that's a separate point. Yeah, the Niners really do need a pass rusher, and now I think this Giants game is going to be kind of tough, even with all of their so many issues. On the Houston side of it, I won't be too much of a homer. I still have to talk about the other team. It was a huge game for them. They were able to go to 3-4, and this was a win that they needed just so badly, especially because Indianapolis is 7-1 and seems to be running away with the division. And in the AFC wildcard spots are going to be a little bit hard to get, especially if the AFC West sends out 3 teams for the postseason, which it's looking like they'll do comfortably right now. And for Houston, I've had to talk about them a few times on the pod, especially because of how disappointing their season's been. So it seems like every week or every few weeks, I'll come on here and I'll just like slam my fist on the table and be like, their defense is so good. They're so well coached. There's so much talent. Like if you look at their defensive line, not a single flaw. Their linebacking core is great, especially because they're coached by probably the single best player or single best coach in the league to coach linebackers in D'Amico Ryans. Their secondary is awesome. They have what I would call a top 3 corner in the league in Derek Stingley. So we know their defense could completely shut down other teams. And they did. They have for the last few weeks. It is just a matter of can their offense get to 20? And that has been such a struggle for Houston. Even when the other team, or when they get 4 takeaways, they can't get 20. But in this game, we finally saw if Houston can run the ball, if CJ Stroud can make efficient, quick passes, and try and mitigate the fact that their offensive line sucks so bad, they can just destroy a team. They can be dominant. Like I said, the time of possession of this game at the end of the first half was 25 minutes to Houston and 5 minutes to the Niners. There was nothing the Niners could do in that first half. Completely stifled them, except until the end of the first half, of course, when they were able to get the kick return that ended up leading to points. But yeah, there was no momentum until then. So I even think it's as simple as just like getting a ground game going, because that's something they can build on. And if they can get, again, competent play out of CJ Stroud, there's something here. I really this is one of those teams where I know my gut is telling me, or my head is telling me, I should have quit on this team so long ago, especially after that dumbass game against Seattle, which I made a short on. But it's just, I see how much talent they have on defense, and I'm like, wait, there's still something here. So for Houston, I'm going to say wait and see, because they have Denver on Sunday, which I think is going to be a huge game. Those are 2 teams that really do have something to prove, especially Houston. And then they have Jacksonville the week after, which will be big in terms of, because they need to get up on Jacksonville if they want to make the postseason. So 2 huge weeks coming up for Houston. And if they can somehow, even getting out of those games 1-1, will be huge for Houston. Moving on to what seems to be now a weekly occurrence, which is a very, very drunk game. Or I guess we can do a drunk game of the week. That sounds fun. But a very odd game here in the Jets and the Bengals. There's so much to say about this game. A game where the Bengals were up, I want to say 14 points in that fourth quarter. And of all teams to lead a comeback on you, the freaking New York Jets do. And they go to a glorious 1-7 for the first time they get to experience a victory Monday. And, just some stats for the game. Give me a sec here to pull them up. Okay, yeah. Justin Fields goes for 250 yards and a touchdown. Breece Hall, a passing touchdown as well. And Breece had 133 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground. And for the Bengals, Joe Flacco put in another really solid outing. 220 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. And the Bengals ground game, which we're starting to see kind of come back to life now that they don't have Jake Browning in at quarterback, started to look pretty good. Samaje Perine getting nearly 100 yards and a touchdown. Chase Brown getting 73 yards and a touchdown rushing, and having 30 yards and a touchdown receiving. Jamar Chase, 12 catches, 91 yards, continues to be a PPR monster. T. Higgins, a catch, 44 yards, and a score, which, gotta be happy about that one catch. Otherwise, I don't know how T. Higgins fantasy owners would feel. But on the Jets side of things, it was a really, really good Fields game, and he had post-game a really nice sort of touching quote. Really, really became vulnerable, which you don't see out of athletes that often, where he was talking about just mental state and sort of the roughness of the last few weeks, where, if you don't know, his own owner was coming out against him and said we just can't win with that quarterback right now, which is a brutal quote to say. Holy shit, keep that in your building. Aaron Glenn was very honest about how Fields just isn't cutting it and they can't win games because of him. So even though I'm not a Fields guy, as far as his actual play on the field, I've always been pretty I've never liked Justin Fields the player. I think Justin Fields as a person is I wish nothing but success for him, and seeing him get that win was really nice. Breece Hall looked so good this game. Really explosive, but of course the caveat being it's the Bengals defense. I think it's safe to say everyone looks kind of explosive against this team. but he really did look like kind of the Brees Hall from his rookie year. Had a bunch of speed to him, and was really the engine that drove this comeback. They were able to get some huge stops on the defensive side, which has got to feel good for Aaron Glenn because it felt like every time the Jets needed to stop, and especially, of course, to end the game, they were able to get a huge stop right around midfield and and close this one out. And it's a huge win for Aaron Glenn and this Jets team. Finally go to 1-7. This is a regime that I really do believe in. I think that it needs time, but to see them get their first win was great. And to do it against a really, really high flying offense and do it in like a fun comeback fashion was great. On the Bengals side of it, man, this is brutal. This pushes them, I want to say, to like 3-5. Yeah, not 2-5, 3-5. And it's sort of like there were so many doors that were shut last Thursday where it was like, okay, no, the Bengals are a real team. They, Joe Flacco can actually lead them to some wins, and maybe the defense can hold off enough to let the offense sort of shine through. So of course we saw the Hendrickson door shut, and it's like maybe the Bengals could even add a piece here if they can get a win against the Jets. But all of a sudden that kind of just goes out the window completely with this loss. And it's a game they absolutely blew. Not only the fact that they ended up having the ball at the end to potentially go win the game, all they needed was a field goal and they couldn't do it. But that defense just fully fell apart, gave up so many explosives to this Jets team, which is crazy because if you have watched the Jets this year, which for some reason they've gotten a few like primetime or solo slots, so have been forced to, there is no explosives. So giving up so many chunk plays to the Jets was really odd. And I think for Cincinnati, it does open Hendrickson door back up again, which will be fun to speculate on. Do I think the Bengals do it? No, I still think their owner is a cheap, arrogant ass and will not move off of a player, even if it is the most logical thing to do. So crazy Jets game. I don't really like, there's only so much analysis I can give. Other than like that game was just drunk. There's not much for me to say on it, so I'm frankly just gonna move off. If you have not gotten a chance to watch the game, maybe your team was playing in the morning. Highly advise at least throwing on the highlights and watching that one out. Very, very fun game. Moving on, we got the Cowboys and the Broncos. The Broncos win this one 24-44. We got a Joe Milton appearance, which I think we can all always appreciate. Threw a nice touchdown pass to Jalen Tolbert to end this game. But as far as the plays that really mattered, Dak Prescott 188 yards, 2 touchdowns. Javonte Williams, who had looked really good for them throughout the season, kind of got stifled, only 41 yards on the ground. For the Broncos, Bo Nix 247 yards, 4 touchdowns, looks to continuing to be kind of a fantasy demon, which I did not expect. J.K. Dobbins, 111 yards on the ground, continues to be so good for them. R.J. Harvey had a nice explosive run, ended up finishing with 2 touchdowns on the ground. Troy Franklin also, and Cortland Sutton, honestly making up a pretty solid receiving duo for the Broncos. And in my notes, I just have holy Bo Nix, we see you, because I've talked about the Bo Nix roller coaster. I talked about it last week when we were talking about the Giants game. The roller coaster that we get with Bo Nix and Sean Payton. I even said Clay vibes, which, at this point, that's a big insult because Clay Thompson does not look good to start the year. But when this offense is clicking, it really is like so good. You can see how everything works. Like post the really, really weird Bo Nix interception to start the game where he just flat out missed his guy with a minute 20 into the game. It was practically a perfect day for the Broncos on offense. And I talked about how good that run game is for Denver and that they have the trench play for it. Or last week, but we, of course, with them being down 20, we didn't get to see much of it, but it's real and it's so good. It is the stable engine that drives this Broncos team offense forward. Dobbins proved it last year. He's still a very, very capable back. And you start to see the explosiveness with Harvey, which has created a really, really solid 1-2 punch for Denver that is only going to get better as the year goes on and Harvey gets more snaps. So with everything on Denver's offense clicking and I think them ended up having like a 10-yard or 10-point or 11-point lead in the first quarter. We got to see what this Broncos defense could do once they could start teeing off against the pass, and they were so good. Even with PS2 getting injured fairly early on in this game, they held the Cowboys offense to 17, like, I guess, real points, I would say, which is really impressive because this Cowboys offense has been probably the best offense in football. So finding a way to completely shut them down, take Javonte Williams out of the game too, was really impressive out of them. And this is a game even where they were out Dre Greenlaw as well, who had that really, really stupid suspension. It was something that I harped on the previous pod. It is something that should not have stuck at all. It sucks that the NFL kicked or suspended him this game, but thankfully it did not cost Denver the game because that would have sucked. Because that was a complete bullshit suspension, for lack of a better word for it. And for Denver, they're now up to 6-2. They have a full game lead over the AFC West. Or sorry, I think right now technically the Chargers are the second seed, so they have a half game lead on the Chargers, and they are coming off 5 quarters of insane offensive momentum. Of course, with putting up 30 in that fourth quarter against the Giants, and now this 44-point offensive performance. Everything seems to be trending up, really, for them outside of Patrick Surtain. And, with this division, I feel like that so many people, when you look at national media circles, are just like, just scrolling social media. They feel like, so many people have like the certainty to where they think Kansas City is just going to take it, like guaranteed. And right, the way Denver's playing, that's not a certainty at all. It feels like they're getting left out of the mix when people are talking about the AFC West. It feels like some people still like are sneakily like talking about the Chargers, especially with them looking a lot better with Joe Alt back on Thursday. But I really do like this Denver team. It's it's a young group that will only keep getting better and better as their offense starts to gel. And maybe we're starting to see the start of that gelling with Sean Payton, Bo Nix, and that running game really starting to come together. So, big thing with them is it looks like Surtain's going to be out for about a month, and that includes a game against the Kansas City Chiefs, which is brutal timing. If there was like one game where you really want Surtain, it would be that one. Looking at the Broncos' next 4 games, they have the Texans, who I mentioned before. That'll be a fun one, which I'm not sure how much it really matters for the Broncos defense. It's all going to be about if that offense can just like be solid against that insane Texans defense. The Raiders, which doesn't even count as a game at this point. The Chiefs, and the Commies, which will probably have Jaden Daniels by then as well. So that Chiefs game in a few weeks, I think that'll be the big determiner for their division. And of course, whenever they play them again a little later down the line. Because if they can find a way to win that one without Surtain, that'll be something to keep an eye on. On the Dallas side of things, of course, we got to see what the team looks like when the offense isn't putting up 30 points per game and Dak Prescott isn't, like one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Instead, he had 2 interceptions. Offense really couldn't get much going, and we saw the implosion that happens once the offense isn't fully clicking. That defense for Dallas continues to be absolutely awful. I feel like every week I come on here, I talk about Dallas a bit, and it's just the same thing when it comes to their defense. They have no pass rush. They are missing, of course, superstar pass rush who could help right now. But they can't rush the passer. They can't cover. They have no good linebacker play at all. That is something I know will get better once Demarion Overshown. He was a really fun player out of Texas who suffered like this really big injury about a year ago. And when he comes back, that'll help a lot with like sort of splash plays. But it still is definitely not enough to cover up with the so many deficiencies that Dallas has. And if you look back, it really isn't just the Micah trade. If you see what has happened to this defense, because we're only a few years removed from them having the best defense in football. When they were playing the Niners in 22, they were like, I remember watching that defense and they were like shut down. There were so many insane, talented players. You had Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence on that D-line. You had, Trevon Diggs and Deron Bland playing well. And they even had like Gilmore at a time. It's crazy seeing where that defense has transformed now, which is this like weird young but not talented group of players coached by an absolute moron in Matt Eberflus. And you really got to wonder what happened. For Jerry, of course, not extending Micah, which I know, surprising hot take, was not a great call. But even it was like smaller stuff, like extending Trevon Diggs, which has looked to be a really, really brutal signing because for one, he can't stay on the field, and for two, he was never that good of a corner. He was just really good at like jumping routes, but if you actually just put him in coverage, and we saw in the postseason, whenever he would just be put in coverage, it didn't look good, and he really does struggle against like quality receivers. And now even extending Deron Bland, it doesn't look good because he has the same problem with Diggs in that they both always just go for the big play. They're never content to be the guy who has like 2 interceptions on the year, but has fully shut down one side of the field. That's just not those corners. And you don't pay a corner the amount that they did unless they are those types of guys that shut down half the field, like a Patrick Surtain. So just the mistake of committing nearly $40 million a year to these 2 corners and giving up Micah in that process because that money roughly equivalates, but it's something that that this defense has not recovered from, and they're not going to recover from for a long time. So that was all as far as like individual games I want to talk about. I'm going to talk about the thing that we talked about at the top of the show, which was there are a lot of teams that really did just like crash down to reality, and I want to just sort of focus a little bit on each of them. So all these teams that I'm going to talk about were on fringe playoff status or had like just a ton of positive momentum, and they had like gotten huge wins, and 8 days before the deadline, their teams fell apart this week. Whether that was just, getting upset to truly garbage teams or looking lifeless, it's one of those things where now I feel like the whole team has to stop and analyze. So the Falcons, the Bears, the Bengals, the Panthers, the Cowboys, and I wrote like the Giants kinda because theirs was also an injury related thing. But these were teams that had really just a lot of momentum. They'd gotten huge wins. For the Falcons, they had beaten the Bills on Monday night just 2 weeks ago. For the Bears, they were coming off of 4 straight wins. The Bengals beat the Steelers on Thursday night. The Panthers beat the Cowboys a few weeks ago and were up to 4-3. The Cowboys had the best offense in football. The Giants beat the Eagles. Like 2 weeks ago, the way we were looking at all these teams is so different than the way we look at them now. We have so many more questions about these teams. And rather than being like the fringe playoff, like sneaky good teams, they very much found themselves back to just being mid. So all these teams with their performances this week has likely pivoted themselves from, in the case of like Falcons, Bears, Panthers, and Cowboys, buyers to just being flat out neutral or sellers. Like just if we're being specific, the Cowboys likely aren't going for a superstar pass rusher anymore. They're not in the Hendrickson market. They obviously were never in the Crosby market. The Bears were a team that I thought could potentially make a move, whether that was swapping out one of their receivers, because I don't think DJ Moore really does fit with what they're doing right now, or getting a different running back, or even getting some help on that defense. I thought that they could potentially be in the market for that, but with losing 16-30 against the freaking Ravens without Lamar Jackson to Snoop Huntley, no, they're going to stand pat now, especially with how their divisions looked. The Bengals were, post Joe Flacco trade, offense looks dominant again. Maybe we just stand pat and let this thing ride out. I don't know about that anymore. I think that Hendrickson's in a spot where now, especially with him having this lingering hip thing, maybe you just get off him while you can right now. You take a good second-round pick and you move on. The Panthers were a team that were running the ball so well, and they were getting like 200 yards a game on a Rico Dowdle, and it all looked so good, and it was a nice positive story. Good moment. They had good momentum on the year, and all of it came to like such a screeching halt this week with them losing to the Bills 40-9, like never really having a shot in that game, not even putting up a fight. And they're a team where, like we talked about Atlanta last week, where their whole identity got turned against them and they got bullied. And that was 100% what happened to the Panthers, and to a larger degree, where they could not run the ball on the Bills very much at all, which is, shocking because the Bills really can get run on. And not to mention they got bullied by James Cook, who had nearly 200 yards at halftime. It was a complete 180 for this Panthers team. And the reason why I have the Giants in here is because I thought they were a team that, wants to maybe stand pat, sit at the deadline and we'll see. But with the Scadaboo injury, which was really, really brutal, and with that loss against Denver and now getting blown out against Philly, I think they're very much back in that seller category. The guy I had highlighted was Kayvon Thibodeau, who we talked about him during the Niners part, but seems like the odd man out, especially with how much talent and resources are committed to that defensive line. At least them getting a premium draft pick for Thibodeau seems like a good call, but we'll see if they do. Again, conflicting reports as to whether Thibodeau could be on the move or not. Outside of just like trade stuff, the NFC South now with the Falcons and the Panthers just looking absolute dog shit. I think it's just the Bucs division to be had right now, and it looks like they could have it with like a month to spare. I have a like circle on here like week 14, right around then. Seems like a spot where they could potentially go clinch the division because they look just head and shoulders better than everyone else. Speaking of divisions, the Bears. This is a team that was like a game and a half out for the division last week, and now the Lions look really good. They're of course on their bye, but 2 weeks ago they looked good. The Packers look like a juggernaut right now at 5-1-1. The Vikings are getting JJ McCarthy back. Where do the Bears fit in that right now? The Bears are a team that cannot run a consistent offense to save their life. Their defense does not look good at all. They're having a really hard time stopping the run, and they made Snoop Huntley look so good and so efficient out there. So them having a shot at the division, I wrote just fucking impossible. I don't see a single way that they can win the division, which, again, for a team that was coming off a 4-game win streak, is such a huge pivot. And then now with Cincinnati and Pittsburgh falling apart on the AFC North side of things, here comes Baltimore. Because I'm going to pull up Baltimore's schedule. It looks pretty much, it almost seems like a certainty that Baltimore is going to be back in the run for the division. Because if you look at the teams that, I just talked about how the Steelers' schedule is absolutely brutal. Baltimore has a little bit of a different side of it, where they get Miami this week on a Thursday night with Lamar Jackson coming back. They have the Vikings with JJ McCarthy, which is a big, we don't know. The Browns, the Jets, the Bengals, and then, of course, then they have the Steelers, Bengals, Patriots, Packers, which is a little difficult 4-game stretch, and then back to the Steelers. So they realistically have 5 easy games where they can come back and make a run at the division, whereas the Steelers are facing an absolute gauntlet in the next even 8 weeks or so. So I think Baltimore already moved to being the betting favorite for the division and like being very, very good odds to make the postseason. So if I had to guess right now, which is crazy to say, I think the 2-5 Baltimore Ravens will end up with the division, which, I mean, only could happen, of course, in the land of the AFC North. I also have on here QBs that deserve some more respect. Michael Penix and Bryce Young. These are two quarterbacks who I feel like just people kind of just assume they're trash, kind of drag them through the mud. Obviously for the Falcons, because Penix had like some insane stats at times where I remember like near the beginning of the year, it was like the Falcons had never beaten a team who had scored more than 7 points when Penix was a starter. But you look at them this week, 34-10 against the freaking Dolphins, and Kirk Cousins couldn't get that offense moving at all. Bijan Robinson in the ground game got stuffed for back-to-back weeks now. So a game that I think a lot of people thought was just going to be a really easy coasting win for the Falcons that gets them right back on the ship. Anything but. They seem to be in absolute free fall right now. And for Bryce Young, we saw last year when he got benched, with Dalton, it didn't look bad. So when I saw the news that Bryce Young would be out, of course I didn't expect the Panthers to win, but I thought they could keep things somewhat interesting with the Bills, right? Maybe not interesting, but they wouldn't lose 40-9. That was kind of a shocker to me because it's a team that I thought, again, could just run the ball on the Bills and, try and contain the run. And they even did a pretty good job on Josh Allen, but they just got fully bullied. So Bryce Young and Michael Penix, when their teams were out of those two guys, it really looked rough. I think, whether that's deficiencies in coaching, deficiencies in personnel, they're clearly covering up some of it. And then the last thing for the pod, we have it sucks that it feels like every week there's a brutal injury to talk about. And this week it is Cam Scadaboo, a really, really nasty ankle fracture. I remember seeing the clip of it in the stadium, and like it was a video that everyone started seeing at once, and I actually heard groans from the fans around me who saw the injury on their phones. It's such a nasty, brutal thing. It's very similar to the Fred Warner injury, except it's just in like a worse way. Just more of a dislocation, more potential for tears, fractures, and what was probably a hip drop tackle on that play too that went uncalled. A lot of missteps or a lot of refereeing issues in that Giants game. For Scadaboo, I really hope he can just like come back next year and play at the level he has. He has been so much fun to watch. I've loved coming on the pod and talking about Scadaboo every week, which I feel like I've done that for like the last 3 weeks, and it sucks I'm not going to be able to do that anymore. And seeing Jackson Dart's reaction to it on the sideline, it was heartbreaking. Heartbreaking stuff. I think that's all for the pod today. That was like 7 pages of notes, which is impressive that we got through all of that. I would talk about that. This just reminded me. I would talk about the tush push to close out this pod, but I honestly cannot give it the mental energy. I have been so anti tush push for so long. For multiple weeks I came on the pod and sort of slammed my fist. Anything that I can say on the tush push has been said. And all I will say is that I am glad that my sentiment and opinion on the tush push seems to be spreading, and more people are starting to be more and more in favor of banning the stupid ass play. So hopefully that continues. But other than that, maybe I didn't have to talk about the tush push. It's been a phenomenal pod. I look forward to reacting to everything next week. Maybe we'll get a little midweek episode out on my end, but if not, we'll have our college football episode out with Jonah coming out soon. But other than that, I hope you guys have a phenomenal rest of your day.